Hi there. Right, let me just make sure I can make that work. Well, first of all, nice to meet you all. I thought that was a great presentation. I loved the flow of it, actually, because it kind of, first and foremost, the first part of the presentation reminded me of exactly why I got into the digital world and the world that we're now seeing. So the excitement of what's coming in the future, possibly in the longer-term future. But I really like that. But I also like the fact that Alan, I think with great humility, showed how that we know that this is both, we're not adapting probably as fast as we need to, and that there are some pragmatic steps to get us to where we want to go in this brave new world. I also then, and I didn't expect that, but we kind of had a little chat about it beforehand, but I quite like the fact that after all of that, with that humility, Alan then asked for more money for his services. So it's great. So, and again, I guess, clearly there's a future for the agencies in this world, but it's interesting to me because I guess I moved from being a brand marketeer through the 80s and 90s, of course that makes me sound really very old, the 90s, but to being pretty much about digital from the early 2000s onwards, then to me there's no question that move gradually is going to change all of our lives, and it is fundamentally changes everything. So therefore, there's no actual guarantee that the agencies that exist at the moment in this world will make the leap through to the next stage. And I think when Alan points out that we all face now the fact that we've got multiple agencies all treading on each other's toes. When I worked at Disney, I did a kind of quick round around the pure play digital agencies and around the full service agencies to see how they'd integrated digital into their offerings. And of course everyone's at different stages. There's acquisitions, there's putting an eye after your name and bringing out a few more IT people to do digital. There's so many different things going on there that the battle, I think, for the agency world is a really interesting one for us to follow. So I'm going to try and take you through today probably some more pragmatic steps in moving towards the brave new world, things that are starting to affect us now, and that as marketeers that we should be addressing. So hopefully that will give you a kind of roadmap through to where we're going. If you don't mind though, the first thing I was going to do, and this I promise you is not to self-aggrandise, this is just to give you an idea of how my background is, to explain to you how I've come to the conclusions I've come to. So I guess my first major role was at PlayStation, so as marketing director for PlayStation in the 90s. Which was probably one of those money for old rope jobs, because the 90s, the economy was going like this, everything seemed to work. But we did build a brand there, and my role was to build that brand. Clearly, I was there from 93 till 2000, and there really wasn't an awful lot of digital at the time. Any digital that we did was mostly vanity projects, I would say. But essentially, I built that brand, or had a hand in building that brand through that period. But within Sony, what I saw at that time, through that period, was a business that was about, and they often used to call it this, dumb boxes. So, unintelligent consumer electronics products. That PlayStation actually represented the first time that Sony had moved into the world between the dumb box, the broadcast, if you like, and the interactivity. So, it was kind of a 90s clumsy way of doing that, but it was a really good bellwether for where the world was going next. And I witnessed at PlayStation that move and that becoming the biggest profit generator for the whole of the Sony corporation. And then I witnessed the guy that ran Sony PlayStation globally becoming the head of Sony, and then we moved into the dot-com era where everything pretty much went crazy. And that PlayStation, there was a talk at one point where we were going to be able to press a button in head office and all the PlayStation displays nationwide up and down the countries would change, and you would be able to manage everything remotely. That you would have and I'm sure anyone who was around for the dot-com era saw that all the stories of that you would have all services would be provided through the PlayStation network. So all your utilities, all your bills, all your ticketing requirements for gigs, everything. Everyone built that model towards the end of the 90s that said they would be the hub through which everything happened. And that's still going on now. And there's, if you like, it's starting to kind of move back to the businesses that have got legitimacy in doing that. But I saw that go on, and I also saw that PlayStation head go to Sony, run into a brick wall, and then things have to come back again and normalise. So that was the first thing I saw. And funnily enough, the biggest thing that actually made me move on to my next role was that when PlayStation 2 arrived, it was fully network compatible, but broadband hadn't arrived. So that it really, the designer of the PlayStation 2 felt that it would really sing when we got to 100 megabits broadband. And at the time, I think we were just moving out of dial-up. And so it really didn't work. And so there was that kind of future vision, but it collided with the reality of the infrastructure to allow you to do things. So anyway, so I moved from that role into another business that was very much in an embryonic state, which was the mobile content world. So I worked for Orange running all of their entertainment business, which at the time was plinky plonky ringtones, way before iPhone arrived, and games that when, as a games person, when I was demoed the first game on a handset, someone showed me, and they pressed the button and the bullet came out of the gun a second after they pressed the button, and they were delighted that this was a really, and this was now in colour and all of these things. But it didn't actually function as a game, but the business thought this was a great thing, but people playing that would just have a terrible experience. It was an amazing time because, again, it was an evolution. And actually, in the latter stages of my time with Orange, the world started moving towards mobile advertising and mobile search. So I find that really interesting. So almost fortuitously for me, I was at the birth of some of those industries where, at the beginning, all of the search activity on mobile operators, the mobile operators wanted to build and run themselves. There was no question that the Googles or the Bings would be in that market. They were going to build this themselves because they wanted to own that space. So all of these things, and again, the lovely future, when Alan's describing that future, I think it is fantastic. And these things are going to happen, but they really are going to happen in a clear and methodical way. It's going to be an absolute soup and an absolute mess. And then I guess the other role that I had recently was to run all of the digital marketing for Disney, for all of the Disney business. I kind of got lucky because they reorganised, and I ended up running all digital marketing across all of their divisions in Europe. And I mention this because this is probably more relevant to what I'm going to talk about, is that in doing that, we moved to a world where, even though we had marketeers, almost the younger ones who kind of were digital natives and understood and incorporated digital into their thinking, the older ones who literally said, don't make us become digital dinosaurs, but didn't really understand the digital world. We moved to a world where you truly had subject matter experts. So again, where Alan talks about a data scientist, we started to build that into the business itself to understand things like data or social or content, or CRM, digital CRM, if you like, in that context. So I've been part of kind of moving the structure of marketing teams and and then the infrastructure with the agencies and the suppliers around that to make sure that you're kind of efficient in that world. So that was kind of just a preamble. So hopefully I've got my chops in that world. I'll probably ramble on a bit, but that's the kind of world that I come from. And probably another important thing to say in there is the fact that as a brand marketeer by start, all of the studying I ever did was around business studies and marketing. I genuinely feel that I still have an empathy and an understanding of that world, whereas I think what you're getting a lot of these days is a lot of new digital gurus. If you ever get the chance to look up AOL's digital gurus, a guy called Shingy, who goes around digging on the vibe of the new digital world, then I think it probably can help. I can help traverse that move into the digital world. And so I genuinely, and that's another thing, I guess, is that, as I say at Disney, and the client I'm working at the moment with Axo Nobel and Dulux, some of the people very clearly say that we don't fully understand the digital world, and there's no shame in that. No one understands this brave new world. Clearly, it's a brave new world. So I'm going to talk today, when I talk today, I'm going to talk about a few things that, for some of you, because I imagine here that there's a real mixture of skill sets in terms of the digital world. But I'm going to try and talk to you about how I see that evolving, and hopefully I'm not going to be teaching you stuff that you already know. There was a survey recently, or actually it was a paper written by Harvard Business Review that was Capgemini commissioned, that talked about the fact that we talk a lot about the future, the Internet of Things, and all of these new digital developments, but in reality, in the world, it's probably the TMT sector, so technology, media, telco, that has really made this transition into digital and understands more of this world. It doesn't mean they get where it's going, because no one does, But there's only probably 10% of the business in the world that have truly gone through that digital transformation. Again, Alan mentioned the music industry, which I kind of started my career in, actually. But that world, they really didn't get it, and I think it's been plain for everyone to see, but they're a great case study for us for the future. So I think, so what I'm saying is that when I'm talking about this, I'm trying to accept that some people in the room, I mean, if you're in a manufacturing business, digital clearly will be affecting you, but it may not be affecting you in the same way as a digital I mean, I think Dublin's full of now lots of digital expertise and lots of startups. And so I'm going to talk, hopefully, that will cover both areas. So the four things really, or the three things I wanted to talk about are the idea of the growth of the on-demand and the sharing economy, and then talk about marketplaces and their evolution to market networks, and then start to talk about marketing automation and customer experience and its impact on marketeers and the agency world, but specifically on the marketing functions in businesses. And then at the end, just really talk about that impact. So the first thing is, I'm sure most of you are familiar with now, although I will again start with a little anecdote where I was speaking at a conference, an internal conference for one of the companies I've worked for, and wanted to talk about the idea of marketplaces, and so used Airbnb and Uber as reference points. And the management team at the business came up to me and said, look, you're talking to 1,000 of our rank and file. Not everyone will know what Airbnb and Uber is, so can you put it into terms that people will understand? And then the guy that was telling me that paused and then said, we don't understand what Airbnb and Uber is. We've never heard of them, which for me as a digital person, I'm really surprised at. But to be fair, again, this is what I'm saying, is if you're in this room and you haven't heard of them, then, no problem at all. Well, the world we're going into, though, is these marketplaces are starting to proliferate, and they've started, if you like, in the first generation. They very much started as, or if you like, the on-demand economy is all about the idea that if you've got a car, you can contract with Uber and be that taxi driver. Or if you've got a home or a holiday home that you're prepared to rent out, you can now go through the intermediary of Airbnb to have that property put on the market for a rental. So this world is definitely starting to happen. There's a lot of articles being written about it now. It's starting to move us into that understanding that whatever we have as individuals, and that's where this starts off initially, is whatever we have as individuals, we can use in a marketplace. Now, I'm working for Dulux at the moment, and Dulux has seen that we're going to a different mentality, actually, is that the decorating world is going from a do-it-yourself mentality to a do-it-for-me. I wish there was a better way of saying it, but a do-it-for-me mentality. And so, therefore, most people don't want to. And in fact, you're seeing that a lot with at home subcontracting out, having cleaners and going into a marketplace to get tasks done in your home. So there are a lot of businesses that are starting up in that world that are, if you like, addressing individuals' needs and also using individuals who share their expertise and their assets or their individual skills back into an on-demand marketplace. But the next iteration of that is that you're now starting to see the same infrastructure, the same model being applied to the professional services world and even further out into there. So more complex tasks or more complex processes are now starting to become of that. So the two examples I've got here, I've never dealt with them personally, but again, it goes back to the kind of, from a legal perspective, from a management consultancy perspective, these businesses are not building organisations in the old sense. They're building marketplaces where they put buyers and sellers together. So they will now contract with individual lawyers or solicitors, and they will contract with management consultants and build this infrastructure to then provide to either individuals or, again, to big organisations. So I think this new sense of how the economy can work, which is really gaining momentum, is really starting to be talked about a lot, is going to fundamentally change the way that we buy services as marketeers in the future. But even that is just the kind of the first stage of that, because if you like, we go from marketplaces into market networks. And I've put on the side there, if you look, the kind of Rightmove is a marketplace. I worked for Auto Trader a couple of years back, who have become from a physical magazine and now fully a digital marketplace online, the largest digital marketplace, I think, for automotive in the UK. And these are starting to proliferate, but they really are putting buyers and sellers together. The next thing is going to be the market network, which is where a marketplace starts to kind of collide with, I guess, what we know more as social media. So I should have put the logo up for LinkedIn. But if you like, in our personal lives and in smaller businesses, suddenly you've got your identity and your profile that comes from a social media network, fusing now with the marketplace. And you start, and then, if you like, then fusing that with the kind of technology that underpins this, the workflow SaaS technology that will allow you to schedule work and manage projects. And these things are starting to become the networks that I think you'll start to see proliferate, and that, again, as marketeers, we'll either be part of as individuals or we will start to use. And I think these are the kind of things that when this mentality starts to take, you'll see more competition, if you like, with the existing status quo in marketing services, and also with the existing status quo of how marketing teams and organisations are built in the first place. I mean, if you're in a startup, you're probably already using this. So companies like, I know it as Odesk, but I think it's Upwork now it's called, but where you can literally go and get freelancers off the shelf to help you to do work. I worked for a secondary VC company last year that had a number of investments in small startups, and in one of those businesses that was essentially a healthcare business it was contracted to the public sector and to corporates to carry out health checks like a Bupa would do, but they were turning their offering into a mobile offering, and it was all about the data really, essentially. But that's by the by, because they had nothing, they had no organisation to build their proposition, and I helped them build it from scratch really. And I did most of that by using freelancers through a marketplace called People Per Hour, which you may well be familiar with. So if you want a press release writing now, it's easy for €50 to go and get someone to write a press release. If you want a website creating, there are any number of freelancers in these marketplaces. So bypassing the usual routes. And the other thing in there is that you can now start to do things that used to cost a lot of money at agencies, which is where I think the pressure will continue, because you will be able to find these. Now, there is an argument that the quality and the quality control is absolutely still a big issue in there, but quite frankly, you can get quality from 0 to 100% in those environments. And I'm not saying that a big organisation can move to that yet, but it will have an influence on the way that we're structured in the future. On the right-hand side of this is just an example of, again, it's almost the first iteration of these market networks. So this is an example of someone who's an events organiser. And as you can imagine, an events organiser probably is freelance, well, it doesn't have to be, but probably is freelance, and uses lots of freelance to build their network to then deliver the event. Now, the truth is, in the past, that probably meant Rolodeck, phone calls. Now it probably means emails and collaboration tools. In the future, you will be able to use off-the-shelf workflow software that will allow you to bring all of those things together so that you're already connected. Your network is there through the, if you like, the social side. Your marketplace is there, so you will have an end-to-end kind of value chain that everyone can operate in. So the next thing I was going to talk about was just on the side of marketing automation and customer experience. So really the main thing to say about these, I think probably every marketeer in the room is already encountering this, but again, some more than others. Things like HubSpot, which absolutely automate every aspect of what you do, again, potentially bring more of those things in-house than out-of-house, depending on the way that you want to go. Certainly, in a lot of the businesses I've been working with, there is a desire to bring the subject matter expertise in-house and then use the individual tools, whether it be, well, I mean, the truth is it's across the board. So whether it's about publishing in social media environments and building content and managing that content in social media environments, whether it's about CRM and, and keeping through every touch point, communications and dialogue with your audiences. And on that, by the way, I should say, companies like Zoho, which they're not an enterprise-based software, or they probably have got that level to them, but when I've used them, I mean, what you find, having worked for years in corporations, I suddenly find that I can send an email pretty much for nothing, and I can build it, design it, and have it sent to a database as long as I've got the right data again. And you can do those things now, whereas, still I know a lot of companies that are using agencies that it'll be £5,000 just to get an email campaign off the ground using their campaign management tools and their infrastructure. These things definitely are going to question the way that we can use things in the future. But fundamentally, all of these things really are about optimizing across all the digital touch points of a business, and to some extent offline as well. But they start to allow the marketeer to really take control of their overall marketing activity. And then the next thing I was going to mention is customer experience, because I think eConsultancy did a report recently where they surveyed 6,000 marketeers across Europe and came back. I mean, I think content marketing has been a bit of a buzz phrase for marketeers for a while and is clearly now starting to take hold, the transition, if you like, from big above-the-line advertising into that content marketing world. What we're now seeing, though, is customer experience is becoming the biggest thing. And this kind of talks a little bit about integrated marketing, but it's more fundamental than that, in that it's every touch point that you have with your customer is now, it's vitally important to make sure you get those, the interactions right. And the problem with this is that customer experience, in some businesses, like when I was at Auto Trader, there is a customer experience representative on the exec management team in the UK sitting alongside the CMO. In other organisations, customer experience is a project. I mean, I think for digital businesses, because user experience, and customer experience are so intertwined when the whole experience is digital end-to-end, they've really grasped this. But in a lot of traditional businesses, customer experience is just starting to percolate up, and it really genuinely is a cross-functional function. The problem, I guess, with it still is that, well, for me probably, is that because I'm a brand marketeer at heart, I still think that the marketing team are the best placed to grab customer experience and make that work for the whole business. But what it does require is marketeers to accept that their role has expanded dramatically in that. I mean, we already know that the CMO and the CIO now vie for budget and vie for kind of strategic initiatives. But now on customer experience, it's something that the whole company has to get behind, probably has to sit in a neutral place. It cannot just be marketing, but the marketeers are best placed to lead that. And I still think, fundamentally, the marketeers, because of their brand values and enshrining the brand values in everything that the business does, are the best place to actually bring customer experience in. But I'd be really interested to hear in the Q&A whether people are already engaged with customer experience, to what level, and whether it's something that's a kind of known entity in the businesses now. So finally, then, I guess just to summarise those thoughts, I think that more marketing services will be provided on demand and through marketplaces. I think you're going to see that start to have an impact at a professional level, whereas at the moment it's much more at a consumer level. I think you're going to see an increase in vertical market networks. So again, I think internally, in-house, you're going to see more marketeers specialised. So I think you will have more experts, certainly in data, but also in social, in content, in CRM, in owned platforms, so managing your own platforms and managing your own platforms. And I think the businesses generally will need to accept that they need that expertise in-house, and that should not be put out and managed entirely by third parties. I think you're going to have a blurring of lines between marketing technology and customer experience, which I guess I've just explained, but that technology piece also shouldn't be underestimated. Is you as a marketing team now need your data scientists, but you also need your technologists. So you need, and I think that's in the business, not subcontracted elsewhere. So I think you need that within your group. And I think I've mentioned on the brand side, you in the face of customer experience, where you will be getting feedback from your audiences and mapping journeys, and in the face of data that is going to give you real-time feedback on what's going on, you still need to stand firm from a brand perspective, because the brand is still the preeminent. I say that, genuinely I could be wrong. I've come from a brand background, so I believe that. But to me, the brand still, and what you represent, what your proposition is, has to stand firm against all of these changes that are coming. And then on top of that, I think you're going to see more virtual marketing teams. So these marketplaces, these market networks, are going to allow some companies to build their marketing teams without having any full-time employees whatsoever. And I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing for marketeers. If you are a lifelong careerist, I think that's going to be difficult. And I think, again, hopefully you can see from my background that I'm more a corporate than I am a consultant. I'm definitely a lifelong corporate. But I've certainly, in the last 3 years, had my eyes open to the fact that there are great talent out there. And I think all of you can be included in that. You can all be part of that new vertical market networks. But also it's fleet of foot for organisations. If you're moving, as Dulux is doing, moving into services, not just product, then you can do that in a way that is low risk and get the expertise out of house. Yeah, and that that kind of comes back to back in the 90s at PlayStation. I did get to work with Trevor Beatty, who I'm sure everyone knows, and Trevor Beatty at that time had his own PR man, which I thought was a real indulgence. But frankly, I mean, that's probably a very 90s way of doing it. But these days, with your ability to optimize your content and your profiles online, you absolutely are building your brand every day and need to make sure that you're building your brand, because you will be part of those networks in the future, or if you want to be, you certainly can be. Yeah, and I guess that's it really. The final thing to say was just that every marketer needs to understand technology, needs to start recruiting, almost putting into every job description now as you bring new people in, that they've got that inherent understanding of technology and marketing automation, because they are going to be a fundamental feature of the future. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you very much.